The massive Imperial starship hung in Earth's orbit like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. Its design spoke of power and authority. Smooth black metal stretching for kilometers, decorated with pulsing purple lights that seemed to mock the primitives below. Admiral Robert of the Earth Defense Force stood at the United Nations emergency meeting, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic displays showing the Imperial vessel. They're requesting immediate communication, he announced to the gathered world leaders. Their translator systems are already compatible with our languages. The chamber fell silent as the main screen lit up. An Imperial diplomat appeared, tall, with gray skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. The alien's voice came through clear and cold. Your species has been graciously chosen to join the Galactic Empire, the diplomat announced. Resistance is unnecessary. Submit now, and your transition will be peaceful. Your resources and people will serve a greater purpose. The UN Secretary-General stepped forward. With respect, we are an independent species. We're willing to discuss peaceful relations and trade, but we won't submit to rule by force. The Imperial diplomat's upper eyes narrowed. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years. We have conquered species far more advanced than yours. Your primitive weapons and limited space travel mark you as barely worthy of servant status. Robert clenched his fists. Humanity had kept their true military strength hidden from alien observers. The diplomat had no idea about the fleet of stealth ships waiting in the dark side of the moon, or the planetary defense grid that could turn asteroids into weapons. We don't want war, Robert said clearly. But if you force this conflict, you will regret it. This is your only warning. Leave our system in peace. Laughter echoed through the chamber. A harsh, clicking sound from the Imperial diplomat. Threats? From creatures who have barely touched the stars. Your species' arrogance will be corrected through proper Imperial education. The Secretary-General tried one last time. Please understand, humans don't respond well to threats. Our history is filled with stronger powers underestimating us. We're trying to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Enough. The diplomat's voice boomed. You have one planetary rotation to surrender. After that, we will demonstrate the Empire's power. Your cities will burn as examples to others who dare resist Imperial rule. The transmission cut off. Robert turned to face the world leaders. They're not going to listen. We need to prepare for war. Within hours, Earth's hidden military machine roared to life. Underground bases opened across the planet. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as communication satellites revealed their weapon systems. The stealth fleet powered up their engines, still hidden from Imperial sensors. The diplomat was right about one thing. Humans were indeed primitive compared to the Empire in many ways. But decades of preparing for alien contact had taught them to be clever. They didn't need to match Imperial technology directly. They just needed to survive the first attack and show the Empire they had massively miscalculated. All defense systems ready, reported Colonel Jane from the Lunar Command Center. The Empire's ship is still maintaining orbit. Their weapons are charged but not targeted. Robert nodded grimly. They think this will be easy. That's their first mistake. He looked at the tactical display showing Earth's hidden defenses. Humanity has spent its entire history fighting wars. We've learned from every conflict, adapted and grown stronger. The Empire has no idea what they're about to face. The next day, as promised, the Imperial ship launched its first attack. They targeted New York, expecting to easily destroy the city as a show of force. Instead, their energy weapons splashed harmlessly against shields that shouldn't have existed. Missiles they hadn't detected streaked up from the ocean, forcing the massive ship to take evasive action. Robert watched from the command center as the Empire's first attempt at intimidation failed completely. Send the message to all Earth forces, he ordered. Operation Awakening is now active. Show them exactly why they should have taken our warning seriously. As alarms blared across the Imperial ship and more human vessels appeared from hiding, Robert remembered an old quote from Earth's history. We are going to show them why you don't poke a sleeping giant. The war for Earth's freedom was about to begin, and humanity was ready to teach the Empire a lesson they would never forget. The Imperial commander stared in disbelief at his tactical display. Where there should have been burning cities and surrendering humans, his sensors showed a nightmare unfolding. Human ships seemed to appear from nowhere, emerging from hidden positions around their moon and asteroid belt. Impossible, he snarled, slamming his fist on the command chair. Their technology level was assessed as pre-spacefaring. These readings must be wrong. But the readings weren't wrong. The first wave of human ships, led by Commander Jack in the EDF Thunderbolt, tore through the Imperial formation like lightning through storm clouds. The human vessels were smaller but incredibly agile, using maneuvers that the Empire's massive ships couldn't match. Target their main weapon systems, Jack ordered through the fleet command channel. Remember your training. They rely too much on their shields. Use the phase shift torpedoes. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years using the same tactical doctrine, overwhelming force and superior technology. But they had never faced an enemy that had spent centuries preparing specifically to fight them. Human ships launched their specially designed weapons. The torpedoes appeared primitive to Imperial sensors, barely worth raising shields for. That was exactly what Earth's scientists had intended. The warheads phased through the Imperial shields as if they weren't there, detonating directly against the hull. "My lord," an Imperial officer shouted. "Their weapons, they're bypassing our defenses. How is this possible?" The Imperial commander watched in horror as his mighty fleet began taking serious damage. His ships were designed to fight enemies that used similar technology: energy weapons, particle beams, and standard shields. The humans were using completely different principles, tactics that hadn't been seen in warfare for millennia. Back on Earth, Robert monitored the battle from Command Center. "Status report," he demanded. Colonel Jane's voice came through clear and confident. "Imperial fleet is in disarray, sir. They're trying to regroup, but our ships are preventing them from forming their standard combat formations. Casualties are minimal on our side." The Empire's arrogance had led them to commit a critical error. They had brought only a small fleet, expecting no real resistance. Now that fleet was trapped between Earth's defense grid and the human ships attacking from multiple directions. "They're trying to call for reinforcements," reported the communications officer. "Our jamming systems are working perfectly. No signals are getting through." In space, the battle continued to go badly for the Empire. Their ships were more powerful, but they couldn't bring their main weapons to bear on the faster human vessels. Jack's fleet had trained for years in asteroid fields, learning to fight in tight spaces with precise movements. The Imperial ships, designed for grand battles in open space, were like giants trying to swat flies. "Pull back to Sector 7. The Imperial commander ordered desperately. "We need to stabilize our formation." But there was no safe place to retreat to. Human ships had seeded the area with stealth mines, creating a deadly maze that only they knew how to navigate. Each time an Imperial ship tried to withdraw, it risked destruction. "Sir," Jack's second-in-command reported, "Imperial flagship is showing signs of reactor instability. Their shield impacts are causing cascade failures." Jack nodded grimly. "Send the message one more time. Offer them surrender before it's too late." The Imperial commander received the transmission with rage and disbelief. Surrender? To primitives. But as he watched another of his ships explode, reality began to sink in. His fleet, part of the invincible Imperial Armada, was about to be destroyed by a species that wasn't supposed to have space combat capability. "This is impossible," he whispered, watching his tactical display fill with more human ships. "We are the Empire. We cannot be defeated by savages." Those were his last words before his flagship's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up Earth's orbit like a new star, marking the Empire's first major defeat in centuries. As debris from the Imperial fleet drifted through space, Jack opened a channel to Earth. "First wave defeated," he reported calmly. But we all know they'll be back. And next time, they'll come with everything they have. Robert's response was equally calm. Let them come. Now they know we can fight. Next time, we'll show them how humanity wins wars. The battle was over, but the real war was just beginning. Earth had revealed its teeth, and the galaxy would never be the same. They're coming in waves now, Captain Mike reported, watching the massive Imperial reinforcement fleet emerge from hyperspace. Just as we predicted. Too bad that they still haven't learned. The Empire had returned with vengeance in mind, bringing thousands of warships to crush the human resistance. They expected to find Earth's forces gathered for a decisive battle. Instead, they found nothing but empty space and scattered debris from their previous defeat. Maintain stealth protocols, Mike ordered his squadron. Let them spread out looking for us. Operation starts when they're fully committed. The Imperial fleet moved cautiously, having learned at least some lessons from their first disaster. Their ships formed tight defensive formations, shields overlapping, weapons ready. They swept through the solar system, searching for the human fleet that had destroyed their first invasion force. But humans had been practicing guerrilla warfare for thousands of years. Space was just a new battlefield for very old tactics. Strike Group Alpha, you're clear to engage, Mike transmitted. Hit and run only. No extended engagements. Small groups of Earth ships appeared suddenly from hiding places in asteroid fields and the dark sides of planets. They struck hard at Imperial supply ships and isolated patrol vessels, then vanished before the main fleet could respond. The Empire's sophisticated sensors struggled to track vessels specifically designed to be invisible. The Imperial Admiral raged from his command ship. How are they doing this? Find them. They must have a base, a staging area. But Earth's forces were everywhere and nowhere. They had spent years preparing hideouts throughout the solar system. Bases hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids. Refueling stations concealed in gas giant atmospheres. Repair facilities buried under the surfaces of moons. Another supply convoy destroyed. Sir, reported an Imperial officer, we lost contact with Battle Group 7 near the asteroid belt. These humans, they're not fighting properly. That was exactly the point. Humanity had studied the Empire's tactical doctrines, their rigid military structure, their reliance on overwhelming force. So they designed a strategy that would turn those strengths into weaknesses. Launch the drones, Mike commanded. Thousands of small automated craft deployed from hidden bays. Each one was programmed to mimic the signature of a human warship. The Imperial fleet's sensors lit up with contacts in every direction. Multiple hostile contacts. Imperial commanders reported in panic. They're all around us. The Empire's fleet split up, trying to chase down targets that didn't exist. Their formation broke apart exactly as planned. That's when the real attacks began. All units, execute Operation Hornet's Nest, Mike transmitted. Real Earth ships struck from multiple directions, targeting the now isolated Imperial vessel groups. Their specialized weapons tore through Imperial defenses that still hadn't been adapted to counter human technology. We can't hold this position, the Imperial Admiral realized too late. Order the fleet to regroup. We must establish a defensive perimeter. But his ships were scattered across the solar system, being picked apart by an enemy they couldn't effectively fight back against. Every time they thought they had cornered human forces, they found only decoys. Every time they gathered for protection, the humans simply waited and struck somewhere else. Status report, Mike requested, watching another Imperial battle group retreat in disarray. Their supply lines are in chaos, his tactical officer replied. They've lost 30% of their support ships. Their main combat vessels are running low on fuel and ammunition. They can't sustain this operation much longer. This was humanity's answer to the Empire's superior numbers and technology. They didn't need to win a direct confrontation. They just had to make the cost of occupation too high to maintain. Send word to command, Mike ordered. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. The Empire's fleet is now scattered and vulnerable. Time to begin Phase 2. As he watched the Imperial ships trying desperately to regroup, Mike remembered an ancient quote from Earth's history. "You cannot defeat a people who turn their homes into fortresses and their ships into traps." The Empire was learning this lesson the hard way. They had expected to find primitive savages. Instead, they found an enemy that had turned their entire solar system into one giant ambush. And this was just the beginning of humanity's plan to drive them back to their own territory. Space warfare would never be the same after humanity showed the galaxy how to fight like guerrillas among the stars. Dr. Peter stood in his underground laboratory, surrounded by pieces of salvaged Imperial technology. His team had been working around the clock, taking apart every captured device, learning their secrets, and finding ways to make them better. "Look at this," he said, holding up what appeared to be a simple Imperial power cell. They've been using the same energy storage technology for centuries. No innovation, no improvements, just the same design copied over and over. That was the Empire's greatest weakness. Their stability had bred stagnation. They hadn't needed to improve their technology for thousands of years, until now. "Their shields still can't adapt to our phase shift weapons," Anna, his lead engineer, reported. "But they're trying to modify their systems. We need to stay ahead." That was exactly what humans did best: adapt and improve. While the Empire struggled to understand why their perfect technology was failing, Earth's scientists were already developing the next generation of weapons and defenses. In orbit, another captured Imperial cruiser was being torn apart for study. Earth's shipyards were working at full capacity, incorporating the best of both human and Imperial technology into new vessel designs. "They're still thinking linearly," Peter explained to the military command during their daily briefing. "Their ships are getting bigger, their weapons more powerful, but they're not innovating. They're just doing more of the same." On the main screen, footage showed the latest battle. Imperial ships now tried to copy human tactics, but their vessels weren't designed for such maneuvers. They were like battleships trying to fight like speedboats. "We've cracked their quantum communication protocols," Anna announced, bringing up complex diagrams. "Their encryption hasn't changed in over 500 years. We can now listen to every transmission within our range." Robert, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "How long until they realize we're inside their networks?" "They probably won't," Peter replied with a grim smile. "Their systems are designed to detect known forms of intrusion. We're using methods they've never seen before. Their security is excellent, against threats they understand." In space, the war continued to escalate. The Empire deployed larger ships with stronger weapons, but Earth responded with smarter technology. Human vessels now carried shields that could adapt to enemy fire patterns. Their weapons used principles the Empire had never considered. They'd finally modified their shields, an officer reported during a skirmish. "Our first-generation phase-shift torpedoes aren't getting through anymore." "Deploy the Mark II variants," Peter ordered. The new weapons used a completely different approach, once again bypassing Imperial defenses. By the time the Empire adapted to one human technology, 3 more were ready to take its place. "Sir," Anna called out suddenly, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the Imperial fleet. They're bringing in something new." The Empire had finally realized they needed to change their approach. A massive vessel emerged from hyperspace, larger than anything they'd deployed before. Its weapons were powerful enough to crack planets. "They think bigger is better," Peter observed, already analyzing the sensor data. "They still don't understand. Send in the new stealth fighters." The Imperial superweapon, for all its power, never saw the tiny human ships approaching. Its massive shields were designed to withstand direct energy attacks, not the specialized infiltration devices Earth had developed. Within hours, the mighty vessel was drifting powerless, its crews trapped inside by their own security systems, which now answered to human control. "Another prize for study," Peter said with satisfaction. "Every weapon they send teaches us more about their technology, and every failure teaches them nothing about ours." This was the true power of humanity, not just the ability to fight, but to learn, adapt, and overcome. While the Empire remained bound by tradition and doctrine, Earth's technology was evolving at a pace that terrified their enemies. "They'll try something else soon," Robert warned. "Something bigger, more powerful." "Let them," Peter replied, already sketching designs for new countermeasures. "The harder they try to overpower us, the more they reveal their limitations. We're not just fighting their technology anymore. We're revolutionizing how war is fought in space." The Empire had started this conflict believing their technology was unbeatable. Now they were learning that technology was only as good as the imagination of those who wielded it, and human imagination had no limits. The Imperial High Command gathered for their daily strategy meeting, frustration evident in their four-eyed faces. Holograms displayed the latest battle reports, each one worse than the last. "These humans," growled the Imperial Fleet Commander, "they make no sense. We run simulations, predict their responses, plan perfect strategies, and then they do something completely unexpected." That was the problem. The Empire had spent millennia fighting enemies who followed logical patterns of warfare. But humans didn't play by those rules. They didn't even seem to understand that rules existed. Admiral Kate of the Earth Defense Force exemplified this unpredictability. Her latest operation had the Empire's strategists pulling their hair out, if they had any. Target their flagship, an Imperial captain had ordered during a recent battle. It was standard doctrine. Destroy the command ship, and the fleet would fall into disarray. But Kate had turned her flagship into bait, letting the Empire think they had her cornered. When they committed their forces to the attack, her real strike force emerged from hiding inside a nearby gas giant's storms, a position that Imperial doctrine considered impossible to use. "How do we fight an enemy that doesn't follow any rational battle strategy?" demanded an Imperial tactician. "They hide ships in radiation belts that should kill their crews. They fly through asteroid fields at full speed. They use their own damaged vessels as weapons." In her command center, Kate reviewed the after-action reports with a smile. "The Empire thinks we're insane," she told her staff. "Good. Let's show them what crazy really looks like." Her next operation involved using Earth's ships to herd a swarm of space debris toward Imperial positions. The Empire's tacticians predicted the humans would use this as cover for an attack. Instead, Kate had loaded the debris with electronic warfare devices that scrambled Imperial sensors and communications. "They're breaking formation," reported Kate's tactical officer during the battle. "Their command structure is falling apart without clear communications." The Empire relied heavily on rigid chains of command. When those chains broke, their mighty fleets became disorganized and vulnerable. Kate's forces struck from multiple directions, targeting ships that could no longer coordinate their defenses effectively. "Psychological warfare report coming in," an officer announced. "Imperial crews are showing increasing signs of stress. They're requesting transfers away from the front lines. Some are even deserting." This was another aspect of war the Empire hadn't faced in millennia: the psychological toll of fighting an enemy they couldn't understand. Their crews were trained to face death, but not the constant uncertainty of wondering what impossible thing the humans would try next. "They're calling us face demons in their transmissions," Kate's intelligence officer reported with a barely suppressed laugh. "Apparently, our tendency to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly as damaging their morale." Kate understood something the Empire didn't. War wasn't just about technology or numbers. It was about the will to fight, the ability to adapt, and the courage to try the impossible. "Their entire military doctrine is based on predictability and control," she explained to her officers. "So we give them chaos and uncertainty. They expect us to value our ships like they do, so we show them we're willing to sacrifice hardware to win battles." The Empire's commanders continued to search for patterns, for some logical framework to understand human tactics. They failed to realize that humanity's greatest strength was its unpredictability. "New Imperial directive intercepted," reported the communications officer. They're ordering their ships to maintain maximum distance from human vessels at all times. They're afraid, Kate observed, not of our weapons or our technology, but of what we might do next. That fear is more powerful than any weapon we could design. As she watched the Imperial fleet adopt increasingly defensive positions, Kate remembered an ancient Earth saying, "The most dangerous enemy is the one you don't understand." The Empire was learning this lesson too late. They had spent thousands of years becoming the perfect military machine, only to face an enemy that refused to fight like machines. The human factor was changing the face of galactic warfare, and the Empire had no defense against it. General Mark watched from the bridge of his flagship as human forces pushed deeper into Imperial territory. The stars looked different here, but humanity's resolve remained the same. Earth's fleets had moved from defense to offense, and the Empire was crumbling faster than anyone had expected. "Another Imperial world is requesting neutral status," his communications officer reported. "That's the fifth one this week." The Empire's grip on its territories was weakening. After centuries of absolute control, their subject worlds were seeing something new, the possibility of freedom. And the human fleet was offering exactly that. "Status of the Imperial Defense Fleet?" Mark asked, studying the tactical display. "Scattered and disorganized, sir. Their coordination is breaking down. Some ships are refusing to engage us at all." This was the result of humanity's relentless campaign. They hadn't just defeated Imperial forces, they had shattered their enemies' belief in their own invincibility. The mighty Empire was facing something it had never experienced: fear. "Multiple signals from the planet's surface," the comm officer announced. "The local government is asking for terms of surrender. They're requesting protection from Imperial reprisals." Mark nodded grimly. This was becoming a common pattern. As human forces advanced, Imperial worlds were choosing to switch sides rather than face destruction. They had seen how Earth fought, and they wanted no part of it. Imperial command ship detected. The sensor operator called out. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." The message that came through was not what anyone expected. The Imperial commander's voice shook with barely controlled rage and fear. "This must stop," the Imperial commander demanded. "You're destroying everything. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years. You can't just change everything." But that was exactly what humanity was doing. Every victory showed more Imperial worlds that the Empire wasn't invincible. Every battle demonstrated new ways of fighting that made the Empire's traditional tactics obsolete. "Their entire society is based on stability and order," Mark's political advisor explained. "We're not just defeating their military, we're threatening their entire way of life." Reports kept coming in from across Imperial space. Worlds that had been loyal for centuries were now declaring independence. Imperial fleets were facing mutinies as crews refused to fight against the humans. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy signatures. The Empire is gathering their remaining fleets for a final stand." Mark studied the data carefully. The Empire was desperate now, bringing together everything they had left. They would try one last time to defeat the humans with overwhelming force. "They still don't understand," he said quietly. "They think if they gather enough ships, enough weapons, they can go back to the way things were. But that's impossible now." The Empire's final fleet was impressive. Thousands of ships, including designs that hadn't been seen in centuries. They were bringing out everything, committing all their resources to this last battle. "All ships, battle positions," Mark ordered. "But first, broadcast this message to every Imperial world and ship in range." His words were simple but powerful. "You don't have to fight for them anymore. You don't have to die for an empire that fears change more than defeat. Join us or stand aside. The choice is yours." The effect was immediate. As his message spread, Imperial ships began breaking formation. Some fled. Others switched their transponders to neutral signals. A few even turned their weapons on their former allies. "The Empire's fleet is falling apart," His tactical officer reported with amazement. They're destroying themselves. This was humanity's true victory. They hadn't just beaten the Empire's military. They had broken its will to fight. The idea that subjects could resist, that change was possible, that the eternal Empire could be defeated. These concepts were doing more damage than any weapon. Multiple Imperial worlds are now broadcasting declarations of independence, the comm officer reported, struggling to keep up with the flood of signals. Mark watched as the mighty Empire began to tear itself apart. They had started this war believing they could force humanity to submit. Instead, humanity had shown the galaxy that resistance was possible. "Send word to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them the Empire's breaking point has arrived. It's time for the final phase." The war wasn't over, but its outcome was now certain. The Empire would never be the same again. The Grand Hall of the former Imperial Palace buzzed with activity as representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered for the historic signing. The massive Imperial banners that had hung for millennia were gone, replaced by a simple symbol representing galactic unity. Robert, now serving as Earth's chief diplomat, stood at the podium addressing the assembled species. Around him sat former Imperial worlds, newly independent systems, and even some Imperial nobles who had chosen to embrace change rather than fight it. 1 year ago, the Empire thought they could force Earth to submit, he began. Today, we gather not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals. This is humanity's gift to the galaxy, the right to choose your own path. The peace treaty was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of establishing a new empire, Earth had proposed something radical: the Confederation of Independent Worlds, each free to govern themselves while working together for mutual benefit. The Empire taught us order, spoke a former Imperial governor. But humans taught us something more valuable: the power of adaptation and change. We cannot go back to the old ways. In orbit above the capital world, ships from dozens of species flew together in formation. Human vessels moved alongside former Imperial warships, their crews learning from each other. The rigid traditions of Imperial space combat were being replaced by new tactics that combined the best of all worlds. Another trade agreement signed, reported Anna, now heading the technology exchange program. 3 more systems want to learn our manufacturing methods. They're especially interested in our adaptive shield designs. This was perhaps the most profound change. The Empire had hoarded technology, using it to maintain control. Earth instead offered to share knowledge freely, believing that innovation came from collaboration rather than restriction. "What about the Imperial holdouts?" asked a concerned representative from a border world. Several Imperial systems still refuse to accept the new reality, clinging to the old ways. "They're welcome to join us when they're ready," Robert replied. "We won't force anyone to change." That was the Empire's mistake. The changes weren't just political. Cultural exchange was transforming societies that had been stagnant for millennia. Imperial citizens were learning Earth's music, art, and literature, discovering new ways to express themselves. Humans, in turn, were learning from the rich history of alien cultures. "Medical breakthrough reported," announced Dr. Peter during the Scientific Council meeting. "Combining human genetic research with Imperial biotechnology, we're curing diseases that have plagued both our species for generations." In military matters, the transformation was equally dramatic. The new combined defense fleet incorporated tactics and technologies from all member worlds. Former Imperial officers learned flexibility from human commanders, while Earth's forces gained from their allies' centuries of experience. "This is more than just a peace treaty," General Mark observed, watching ships from former enemy worlds training together. "This is the beginning of something entirely new." He was right. The galaxy was experiencing a renaissance of culture, technology, and ideas. The Empire's fall had released countless species from intellectual and social bonds they hadn't even known they wore. "Trade volume has tripled," reported an economic advisor. "Free exchange of goods and ideas is creating prosperity even in systems that once depended entirely on Imperial support." But perhaps the most significant change was in how species viewed themselves and their place in the galaxy. The Empire had taught them to know their place and never question tradition. Humanity had shown them that questions and challenges were the path to growth. "We face an uncertain future," Robert concluded his address. "But that uncertainty brings opportunity. The Empire offered stability through stagnation. We offer progress through cooperation." As the assembly ended and the historic treaty was signed, representatives from hundreds of worlds stood together. Former enemies now worked as allies. Ancient rivals shared technology and resources. The rigid hierarchy of imperial rule had been replaced by something more chaotic, but far more alive. "They called us primitives," Robert mused, watching the celebration. "They never understood that our greatest strength was our ability to change, to adapt, to imagine new possibilities." The galaxy would never return to the old imperial order. Humanity had shown them a different path, one of freedom, innovation, and endless potential. The war that began with an empire's arrogance had ended with the birth of a new age. And somewhere in the great dark between the stars, other species watched and wondered about these humans who had changed everything.